Now, sister, best you come with me. I'll be your mother, even though no mother need. I'll bring you honey from the sweetest honeybee. And I'll cover you like that wolf or willow tree. Kissed upon your forehead with lips pressed by. Speaking of like cycles and perpetuating cycles of like oppression, is like, how has religion impacted how you love yourself? And I can go first on that. I feel like religion and the church has taken a toll on me as someone who went through conversion therapy. It made me feel like I needed to get fixed. And I'm recently realizing through my therapist that I'm still carrying that of anytime I'm dealing with like a um, mental wellness issue, that I don't want to admit or acknowledge that there's like something there that I'm not addressing. And it's because I um, am so still view myself through the lens of how the church viewed myself, of like, I need to be fixed and I need to be broken. So like for me to acknowledge that I had PTSD and I most likely have ADHD and maybe some other diagnoses that I'm not aware of, to acknowledge that for me was a lot to reckon with, because it's like I am more effed up than I want to be. So now I need to be fixed. But now, like through the help of my therapist, like realizing these aren't things you're gonna fix. These are things you're going to learn to live with, and you're gonna learn how to cope with. And through loving yourself, you're gonna know how to ground yourself in moments when these things flare up or overwhelm you or frustrate you. So it's definitely the church. Like my relationship with the church is a very toxic one that I'm still unpacking, and because of all that trauma, it's like things that I'm starting to realize, very trivial things, like we're being affected by that belief that I still need to get fixed. And I am, and through like that new pathway of like realizing of like, I need to like, how do I show up for myself and my partner and my friends, and how do I embody that love that used to be there before all this shadedness. um that was my long-winded answer.
I was really hesitant about if I was going to admit this on camera because this is something that I learned in therapy back in like 2018. And I'm still like, I don't feel like I've done much work around it, to be honest. And like, so in the context of like the church, I was like the kid who like was like, I knew all the theology. I knew like everything that was happening in all these books of the Bible, not only like in the narrative of like knowing stories, but like in terms of like theological debates. And like I was like the kid, like 8 years old, like low key trying to get my first lady together and tell her, no, actually, biblically speaking, this is what's true. And she actually came back to me the next day and like apologized and was like, you're right. And like I was that kid. And obviously, like that's not who I am anymore. Not obviously. I think like in terms of like my relationship with religion, I'm not like that anymore. I think I'm more I'm very much like I think I'm still stubborn and like very hard in my stance, but that stance is that we simply do not know everything. And that like it's more so about like relationship rather than um trying to like be the one who's right. But I do feel like that like carries over in some ways to like non-religious things, to where especially if it's ethical, I am like, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this, because I definitely believe that I make room for like nuance and that I don't think that I know everything. But the things that I do know, I'm like, oh, baby, I know. You know what I mean? Like, I am very understanding of like the areas when we talk about like justice and ethics where I'm like, oh, yeah, actually, I don't know as much about that. Y'all, fun fact, I just found out that the Cold War was not a literal war last year. Like I like, and that's the thing. Like I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I know. Like I don't, child. Yeah, I'm just gonna shut up because I feel like I'm gonna say something. It's just gonna be like digging a hole. But like yeah, but like when it's the stuff that like I care about, not I care about. Clearly, I care about like anti-capitalism, but like when it's the stuff that I'm more familiar with and well read on, at that point, I catch like the missionary coming out, like I catch the evangelist coming out. And like I think like on the surface it sounds cute in terms of like, yeah, like on fire for justice. But like what happens, like I know how like violent and cringy and frustrating that energy was. And I think that's something that I like want to be cognizant of as I'm like navigating all kinds of relationships and all forms of love, and like having grace with people when, even if I am right, if they like either disagree with me or just didn't already know that. Like that's kind of what I'm thinking about in terms of like how religion has impacted my love for other people, and also let my like my love for myself and my grace for myself. Y'all, I felt so terrible when I found out that the Cold War was not a physical war. Y'all, literally, like I beat myself up about that for days. And I think like that energy of like having to like be the correct missionary who proves everyone else wrong, like I need to let that go to like fully love myself and have grace with myself.
I didn't think I had anything to say about this, and then I realized that I did have something to say about this, which is that I kind of interpret this question. I equate religion with spirituality in this question when I think about it, because I think that people turn to religion and turn to spirituality and really kind of just like look up in general because we're looking for answers, and answers just for like what's happening in our lives, why something happened that we disagree with, why our lives are moving in the ways that they are. And I actually feel like those answers are in our bodies. And sometimes when we use even just like astrology, right? Like I'm also always cognizant of the fact of how I'm looking always to these external things to tell me why I am the way that I am. When my body and my cell, like the cells in my body know why I'm the way that I am, right? And like the exploration, like there's nothing wrong with exploring different spiritualities and religions, but I think that when you focus all the time in doing that and not doing the focusing and exploration on yourself, it becomes you just looking everywhere for everything, right? And I think about how, I was a youth worker for many years. One of the things that I was always clear about as a youth worker, in social justice spaces, was that young people are the experts at their own lives. And like when I start thinking about me, and how I'm an expert of my life, and like I can talk all day about my daddy issues and how that creates abandonment issues for me and like where that lies and what that looks like. I think about how religion and spirituality has been used, has been weaponized to kind of put me in my place in a lot of ways, and how I use sometimes spirituality and these different tools that we have to get to know ourselves more based on, the stars. Sometimes I use that to punish myself when I don't actually think that the usage is helpful. So I guess I'm sitting with like just how external forces and factors have influenced how I love myself in general, when really I want to spend more time creating a narrative where I am teaching myself how to love myself.
I really love that. Thank you for sharing that, BC. And I think similarly, yeah, I spoke on how religion got me all effed up and like the trauma, but I didn't speak to what I'm doing now and what my spirituality looks like and how it's affecting how I love myself. And I think that sense of like approaching love as a spiritual practice, approaching community as a spiritual practice, approaching giving mutual aid as a spiritual practice is like those I think helped me remember that to be my highest good or to be of my highest good is to be of service and to be of good for the people around me and for my own body and for because like there's this Mayan saying where it's like in lakek, which is you are my other me. So if I approach the way I love and the way I am in community with people I care about, if I approach it through that spiritual lens, it allows me to reflect that love back to myself. And that's something I've been having more moments of self-love and like self-appreciation lately through this spiritual lens. But also it's like, so you say sometimes we look to the stars or we look to astrology or whatever to punish ourselves or to like give us answers that we already know deep in our bodies. I feel like that's how I approach like my tarot practice. Like this isn't fortune telling or divination. I'm looking to the cards to, first of all, I do it in a way that channels my ancestors, and through honoring and remembering my ancestors is another way I can love myself and like my roots and who I am as a person and like how they paved the way for me. Channeling them wholeheartedly into my tarot readings, then asking them to give me the message I need to hear, pulling the cards, interpreting the cards, and it's like, this is a message I already knew. It's been living in my body. It just hasn't been highlighted in the way because I haven't been actively thinking about it through the systems of oppression we're living in that distract us or keep us from thinking about those lessons or those moments or those victories or what have you. So like for me, the tarot is a way for like, we're gonna bring something out of you that's been in you and we're gonna bring it to your forefront and to your vision so you can do something with it. So I really love that you like made me think about the other side of the coin of like, yeah, trauma got me all messed up, but like what am I doing now to show and fix and like bring back that love for myself, but also for like the people I care about.
Yeah, both of you made such great points. It really, BC, when you mentioned, how we're religion teaches us to look up, and it's like, yes, not only does it teach us to look up, but it also it teaches this idea that like we come into this world like broken and like shattered and like in need of saving or rescuing, and it's like, in as much as I appreciate um the cultural aspect of the Black church in terms of like the music and even like opportunities for creativity in the community, it really has been like wielded against the community in so many tragic ways, just in that sense of like, well, I'm just gonna pray about it and like it'll just work itself out. And for me, like as I've gotten closer to spirit, to the creator, and just realizing that like I have, that if I believe in this being created me with everything that I need to get myself to wherever I need to go and will align me with the people that I need to be with to get to this thing. So it's almost, and like Sebastian was saying, it's like the thing that caused the pain is also like the remedy at the at the same time. And it's oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful in that way.
I fully stand for what I said. I'm also thinking of all the ways, of all the narratives that I know about religion based on people that I know. And it brings me to a space of contemplation. I just want to pose a question to the group. And so I'll just give a short context. While I feel this way, I also am cognizant of how for a lot of people, especially in like social justice and more movement space, I know there are a lot of people who have been raised to adhere and adhere to a certain religion and have found much comfort in that. And something else that worries me in community is that people can't feel like maybe they can't be honest about the comfort that they have felt in religion or spiritual practice because of, for fear of causing trauma and pain to other people in community who we know, based on our intersections, have historically and traditionally been marginalized in a religious space. And I'm wondering what kind of movement we've created that people lie about this, and like why we aren't able to be transparent to one another about like religion, and which is why I feel like Divine is so important, because to have honest and real conversations about our connections to religion and spirituality without fear of judgment is really important.
Speak on that, BC, because I've also been having these like conversations with myself of like, what good is decolonization if we're leaving behind the communities that rely or fall back on these beliefs and these systems that they may have harmed us, but they find solace in it. And it's like, there is power in the community that a church offers. There is power in liberation theology. There is power in the coming together and communion and charity that comes from it. And so it's like, what is it what is the good of decolonization? What is the good of holding yourself to this higher standard when you're like pooping on like people who want to believe in this, or it helps them get through their day? And because like there was a moment where there was this white tattoo artist who imposed Lori Lightfoot's image on a prayer candle of a saint. And it like made me feel some type of way, and other similar spiritual peoples too. But then when like it was brought up to like one of like a Facebook group that was supposed to be very like spiritual and like black and brown, they were like defending it, and they were like, "Fuck the Catholic Church, fuck the," you know what I mean? That general sentiment. And I was like, what? Like, so you're just, because you've decolonized, because you have theorized yourself and are all about the academic theory and all that, you're just gonna leave a community behind because, like, I get the trauma that it harmed you, but you're just gonna leave it behind because you think you're better than that, or because you feel like you're evolved because you don't believe in the mumbo jumbo that these churches taught us. So it's like, what good is that if we leave behind communities? And I think also like that's the important parts about love for community. It's like no one gets left behind. We're not all liberated until everyone is liberated. So for you to have this attitude of like, fuck the church, I don't care about these people, they're like very they maintain systems of oppression. That's not the case always. And it's important to be critical of those systems, but also like some people find solace to get through their everyday in a capitalist, hyper capitalist society that aims to like destroy our communities.
So for one thing, referencing your question, like what good is decolonization if this is how y'all are handling it? The reality is that it's more so like, what good is decolonization? Because the reality is those responses are colonial. Like this idea that you are like, okay with this demon mayor we have in Chicago, who is a cop, y'all. Literally, like, because I recognize we have audience members outside of Chicago. So for those who may not know, Lori Lightfoot, like, helped with the cover up of Laquan McDonald's murder by police in Chicago. And she also is like trying to force teachers and students back into schools during this pandemic without like proper resources. Honestly, the list goes on. A demon. Anywho, it's not colonial. I mean, no, it is colonial to sit here and like defend this literal demon being on a prayer candle in the name of you saying, oh, well, fuck this candle anyway, when in reality, they're not looking at history and like what these things actually mean. Like that specific candle, what that meant for indigenous communities. And then like when I think about like the Black church, like literally historically, the Black church is cultural and political, and like just as cultural and political as it is religious. You know what I'm saying? And like so much of it was like a mode of like self-protection. I'm gonna shut up because I feel like I've said this in so much like divine programming. But at the end of the day, like those efforts, like decolonial efforts are always that, girl. That's just not decolonial. Like that is actually feeding into colonizers and just saying what you thought felt good and finding a way to cape for it. And like that's what we're not gonna do. The reality is like these conversations, when we talk about having nuanced dialogue around like religion and spirituality, like it's not like gonna be some easy pamphlet we can open and boom, this is the right thing to say. So much of this is so complicated and case by case and like so specific to the individual who's experiencing it. Those types of approaches to it, I'm sorry, I got mad. Those types of approaches to it are like honestly like perpetuating the same colonization that they're allegedly trying to end.
And that's on period.
And that's on Mary Had a Little Lamb.